تسوي تدرس وكذا؟
My name is Ali, and I'm going to be talking about philosophy today. Just like Western philosophy, يعني الفلسفة الغربية أكثر شيء راح أتكلم عنه.
أنت تدرس فلسفة عرفنا؟
بل
قول لنا.
أوكي دا أسوي هسه بحث. الدكتوراه مال الفلسفة أسوي هسه أول سنة مالتي. I'm doing research in global poverty يعني فقر العالمي والjustice العدالة يعني فلسفة أخلاق أكثر شيء بس مو بس فلسفة أخلاق فلسفة السياسة هم يعني الأخلاق it's more about individuals and actions but فلسفة السياسية it's more about groups and like outcomes big consequences. So I was just going to start with talking about what is philosophy and then everyone has their own معنى and every philosopher will tell you something else. But Bertrand Russell هذا فيلسوف كبير إنجليزي عايش 1872 إلى 1970. He said science is what we know and philosophy is what we don't know. Philosophy is about thinking about questions very basic but very important. They're the first questions that you ask before you start knowing anything. That's why before in the time of Aristotle and أفلاطون مثلا هذا مال الأغريق philosophy was pretty much everything was philosophy. يعني مثلا physics was part of philosophy. كان يسمونه natural philosophy يعني فلسفة الطبيعية. فلسفة الطبيعة. Ethics يعني فلسفة أخلاق is part of philosophy again. Politics part of philosophy. Everything was theory يعني كل theory. So science is knowledge. فلسفة is like a research or thinking about questions. Philosophy, that's why it was more important before than it is now. Because especially after Francis Bacon اجى or he explained the scientific method يعني شلون نبحث بطريق علمي بعد physics came its own subject. Psychology later became its own subject. فلسفة مثلا مال
فصلة العلوم يعني.
فصلة العلوم كان قبل كله من فلسفة. Because they found their method يعني شنو method يعني؟ طريقة. They found the طريقة. It became its own thing. Physics is not part of philosophy now. Maths is not part of philosophy. All these areas were before philosophy. The three areas that we do philosophy in, the first one is metaphysics, so we understand what the nature of the world is. And ontology is just another word for study of what exists, what things exist. Then there is epistemology, يعني مال فلسفة المعرفة يعني theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? Then there is axiology. This is the study of what the sources of values are. So you see the first two, they're about how the world is and our knowledge about it. But the third one is about values. يعني مثلا right and wrong, good and bad.
الحكم.
Yeah, الحكم. Where does it come from? I'm going to talk about that later. This is ethics and فلسفة الأخلاق. Obviously, you know, right and wrong. هذا يربط it has a relation to this. And aesthetics يعني مثلا what's beautiful. Something's beautiful, something's ugly. They say it depends on who sees the painting. That thing is they say it's like it depends. Nesby had one of the theories. It says, oh, what's beautiful depends on you seeing it or something. Now someone else says, no, what's beautiful is judged by someone who knows what's beautiful. يعني مثلا art critic. يعني واحد اللي يعرف مثلا what's good art. He comes and says that's a good painting مثلا. And so like that's how you know there is actually something that's not Nesby. I want to talk about just a little bit of history. There's a lot of names here. I'll just go slowly. So, philosophy started actually like what I'm talking about Western philosophy again. So there was philosophy before it. مثلا they had their own philosophy of like life after death and all that sort of thing. But Western philosophy started in Miletus. It was a city in Ionia, one of the islands near Greece. The first name that comes up there is Thales. That was a big philosopher. And the three philosophers you see there, they're all students of the other. So Anaximenes, student of Anaximander, Anaximander, student of Thales. And they were philosophers, but their philosophy is very natural. They're thinking about what the world was created of. مثلا, Thales has the theory, he says everything is made of water. Everything is made of water.
طالس نفسه أرسطو تقصد؟
لا لا لا.
لا لا
طالس. إيه قبل إيه.
قبل أرسطو.
They're called pre-Socratic يعني قبل سقراط. الفلاسفة اللي اجوا قبل سقراط. So Thales thought everything was made of water. Anaximander هذا طالب مالته. He thought everything came from something else, from something that is not ending, something without, it's mysterious, but it's one thing. And then Anaximenes هذا طالب مالته. He thought actually everything came out of I can't remember exactly, but they all thought that there was something, and they call it the one, al-wahid, and everything came out of that. So maybe you can see a little bit of similarity with that, with religion, God. You know, everything comes from one thing. They had this idea of the one thing, everything comes from one thing. It's weird because in Greece they had a lot of what they call gods. هذا gods of Olympus اللي تعرفون. بعدين they came Greeks. Socrates, he's pretty much like the first big moral philosopher, فيلسوف أخلاق, and he goes around. He goes in Athens, and he asks people, makes them think about questions about life. What is justice? How do we know what's the right thing to do? What is شجاعة مثلا أخلاق? You know, all these like قيم اللي كان عندهم يخلي الناس يفكرون عن هذا القيم اللي كان عندهم. أو مثلا for example, one person, he goes to he thinks he knows a lot of things, right? He thinks he's a religious man, very good man, and he goes to charge his dad with murder. He says like, my dad killed this person and I think he's wrong, and Socrates, Euthyphro. And Socrates says, oh, so you must know a lot. Let me ask you this, let me ask you that. And he asks them a lot of questions, makes them think about these questions. He doesn't give them answers. He doesn't give them answers. He just makes them think a lot about like important questions about life. That's what philosophy is really, like especially moral philosophy. Getting to think about the stuff that is important. I highlighted Plato and Aristotle because they're very important if you're going to read anyone. And Plato is a very good start because it's very simple. أفلاطون, very simple. Aristotle كان one of the biggest philosophers. They used to call him الفيلسوف, the philosopher. He pretty much knew everything and anything that was existing at that time. Biology, zoology, فلسفة, everything. Pretty much everything.
لأنه كتب because he's right.
He writes everything, but this is before science will. Like the new way of doing science that we have now, مثلا اللي اجوا من Bacon or with Galileo Newton, that we do with تجربة. He is a very تجربة-based man. He's based on experience. But he still didn't rely so much on experience. مثلا he says everything falls to the earth depends on how heavy they are. Okay. So for example, إذا كان فد شيء مثلا وزنه هواية راح ينزل أسرع. بس هسه احنا نعرف that's not true. Everything falls at the same speed. I can show you. I can take مثلا this mouse and something heavy and I can show you. But it's weird. This is one of the biggest men and he's very smart. And he didn't try to do this. Why?
تجربية مثلا.
تجربية. So you can see the importance of science. After science comes along, philosophy takes a little bit of a backstep. الناس ما يهمون بالفلسفة بعد الساينس يجي. But we're talking about when I talk about ethics, I think the most important thing when we talk about people and stuff is the philosophies of life. الفلسفة مال مثلا.
عند صوتك شوية.
What's important for people that are not philosophers is philosophies of life, different ways you can live. And I thought one of the biggest influences, and actually sort of relates to what Muhammad was saying about not caring, not caring about some things that don't matter. It relates to Stoicism. Stoicism is a kind of philosophy. It says no matter what happens, you should just pretend that it doesn't matter. This is actually a bad version of that. It's not exactly what Muhammad said, but it's a very bad version of it. It says, no matter what happens, you should just act like it didn't matter. They put me in prison, doesn't matter, I don't have to cry. They make me a slave, doesn't matter. Everything, actually one of them, Seneca, he was a wazir, I think, of one of the emperors, امبراطورة مال روم. كان ياخذونه وكان يريدون يقتلونه. عائلته اجوا ويبكون وهذين. قال لا تبكون, I don't care, and like it's all going to be alright, I'm just going to be dead. But it's a bad way of, I'm summarizing.
Uncaring.
It's very uncaring. There's a good part to it, but there's also a bad part. Good part is, you should be content. You should be satisfied with what you're given in life. We all have different things. We should just accept what we have. But there is a limit to, you should show the right attitude. If something you should be sad about, you should be sad about it. If someone dies, it's all right to cry. If someone gets married, you should be happy for them, but not to show no emotions, to show that it's not good and it's not bad. It's just you're making it good or bad. This is something you hear a lot. It says, there's nothing good or bad in the world, but what you think of it, that's what makes it good or bad. That's not exactly true. I think maybe there are some things that you're meant to be sad about. You should be sad about someone dying. You should be happy for someone getting a good job, or being married or happy or something. And then philosophies of religion, I just highlighted here. There are some important philosophers. This is in Christianity, Masihiyya, Kanisa. After the Stoics, this was in Rome. After the Stoics, when Christianity became the official religion of Rome, Christianity كان الدين الرئيسي مال Constantinople. Philosophy of religion became very important. They want to understand what God is, how God works, and all these questions. And other books from the Greeks, they were pretty much ignored. After, I think it was Thomas Aquinas, يجي يحكي وياهم يخلي شوي من أرسطو يجي يعلمون أرسطو بس قبله for about 1,000 years just philosophy of religion. الفلسفة كان مثل حرام يقولون بس they think about Christianity and that's it. لأن هذول كانوا مشركين فكل الفكرة مالتهم غلط ما نعتمد عليها نعرف كانت كل شيء.
لا قد حرموا الفلسفة باعتبارها للحياة الوثنية القديمة.
اي لأن كانوا مشركين
ما حرموها حولوها دينية.
اي نفس الفكرة المسلمين بعض المسلمين عندهم هسه هذا this is like after Thomas Aquinas. These are very important philosophers. These 6 philosophers, I studied them in university. كلش مهمين. They relate to 2 different schools. actually إنجليزي
خلينا عربي وصالح.
إيه. There are 2 different big schools of philosophy that came. Descartes is basically, it came around the same time that science came. So he's going to be, using the science results a lot in his working. They are the rationalists, that group. And these guys are the empiricists. Rationalists think that not all our knowledge comes from experience. مو كل العلم اللي عندنا يجي من تجربة. الempiricist يقول pretty much all our knowledge comes from experience. These are the hard empiricists. Descartes and Spinoza and Leibniz, they go about their work with they don't care about the experience so much. They focus more about a theory, a lot of theory, a lot of metaphysics that later people will not like. These guys, Locke, Berkeley, and David Hume. John Locke, Bishop Berkeley هذا مسيحي هو, or David Hume. هذول they think we should rely on experience. أكثر شيء نعتمد بالexperience. إيه. ونفتهم الحياة. This was between about 1600 to 1750. So يعني 150 years. This is the works are there. Actually, the names of the works are up there. The works that they have, they're very important. It's very interesting. If you want to go deep in philosophy, these guys are very good to start to study. And each of them answers the other one. If you want to understand Spinoza, you have to read Descartes, because Spinoza is Descartes' student, so you have to understand what Descartes says. Then you understand what Spinoza says. Leibniz will answer them, obviously. Hume destroys pretty much everything that came before him, and he throws a lot of doubt on a lot of important issues. مثلا علية, the causation. مثلا we see, one thing happening, then we see another thing happening. I'm talking right now, and you hear a voice, and you say the voice is caused by me. I caused the voice, and I say, how? What's the connection between them? How do you know there is a connection? My lips are moving, particles are moving, and then you hear something. How do you know there is a connection? And he just throws doubts. He says, not necessarily. This is not a necessary connection. Your mind is actually making you think there is a connection there, but there is really no connection.
يعني اهم شيء يشبه على مساله هيوم شلون انه شكك في مساله العليه، انه احنا نتصور انه حركه ايدينا هي عله لتحريك الهواء. يقول هيوم شكك حتى بهاي المساله، قال ماكو شيء اسمه عله ومعلول، سبب ومسبب. قال في الحقيقه هي عباره عن مقارنات، واحده تجي ويا الثانيه، اما مو واحده مخلوقه عن الثانيه ومسببه عن الثانيه. ايوه هذا قتل الفلسفه في الحقيقه.
He says I see this thing and I see this thing, but I don't see the causal relation. يعني النسبه
سبب العلاقه.
يقول انا اشوف مثلا 1 billiard ball or second billiard ball. The first one hits the second one moves.
Yeah.
See one thing and I see another thing happening, but I don't see the cause that connects them in experience.
نفس العليه يقول انا ما جاي اشوفها، نفس الحتميه والضروره انا ما جاي اشوفها.
مو غموض يعني؟
ها؟
مو غموض يعني هذا كلش واضح.
هذا التشكيك، يعني اهم شيء احنا مسلم عندنا شكك به، وشكك به بمنطق عقلي، وبعد ما نقدر نعتمد حتى على اهم مساله عندنا.
علية.
اي بس.
Well, second important thing I think that
يعني كان اكثر شيء ضد المسيحيه.
هذا بس
يعني ان الوجود هذا الانسان مو دلال على وجود الخالق. كان اكثر شيء هو يفكر به اكثر هو يوم عنده.
I think that's part of it. هذا رأيي، بس أعتقد هذا part of it because he's a philosopher. Part of it is
هو اكثر.
هذا part of it. I think, like for example, he has one book. It's called Dialogues on Natural Religion. هذا واحد يسميه Hylas وواحد Philinus, and they're talking about religion and this is a very good book actually. For philosophy of religion, very good book. He talks about مثلا we see so much beauty in the world. There must be a God. We see so much design in the world. There must be a creator, designer. And he says actually no, that's not true, and he gives reasons and stuff. But he's actually a philosopher. Most of the works he does, they're just theory. He's just interested. The second important contribution, David Hume, is very important. The second part, I'll give you an example, is about induction, استقراء. And my dad actually talked about Sayyid Sadat, and he said, Sayyid Sadat actually gave, he يرد على David Hume. So it's important. It's a very important issue. Thank you.
يعني الاشياء الثانيه اللي في الحقيقه تكلم بها ديفيد هيوم هي مساله الاستقراء، اللي الشهيد الصدر كتابه في الاسس المنطقيه للاستقراء يحاول انه يسد الثغره اللي انوجدت من زمن ارسطو، هي وتكلم فيها هيوم. السيد الصدر محاولته لانه هاي الثغره شلون نسدها، ومن خلال الاستقراء، عمليه الاستقراء شلون نحاول نوصل لليقين، لانه الاستقراء يدخل في العمليه التجريبيه الحاضره الموجوده هسه. كل العلوم التجريبيه تعتمد على الاستقراء، يعني نشوف انه ايش قد اشياء نجربها ونطلع بنتيجه. حاجه على عموم الفلاسفه.
It's got to do with the logic of مثلا I'll give you an example. مثلا you see 100 ducks and they're white, and you say the 101st duck, the next one is going to be white. Or I'm talking about just example. I said we can make the example better. مثلا 1,000,000 ducks, or pretty much every duck you see in your life is white, and you say ducks are white, or all ducks are white. مثلا. Okay, is it possible that the next duck you see is not white? مثلا black? It's possible. But هذا إيه بس يعني يقول I'm gonna go with the reasons I have. No, there's probably not gonna be this one.
لا تستطيع التنبؤ ولا تستطيع التعميم.
أي.
You can guess
أي.
for the next one and you can give حكم شامل بعد.
بس David Hume راح شوية further. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
مثلا with the sun, we say for example the sun has always come up. Okay, in the past every day the sun comes up, and I say, do you think the sun will come up tomorrow? And you
يوميا
say,
تشوف الشمس تطلع، أنت تقدر تحكم إنه باكر تطلع الشمس؟
hey, and you say, you might say yes, and I say, how do you know? You say, well, it's always come up, and I say, how do you know that tomorrow will not be different to the past? You say, it could be, but the chances are very low. And I ask you, how did you make that judgment? How did you come up with the chance? You say, the chance of it not coming up is 1 out of, let's say, 1 million.
1
Okay?
million.
And I say, how did you calculate that? You said, the chance of tomorrow not being the same as past is 1 out of 1 million. And the chance of tomorrow being the same as past is 99%, let's say. How did you make that judgment? You assume tomorrow's going to be like the past. You thought tomorrow was going to be like any other time. But that's the very thing I'm asking about you. You don't know. And you can't even say it's probably going to happen. So the idea is, you don't know what's going to happen, and you can't even tell me the sun will probably come tomorrow. So it's like انتهاء الميتافيزيك.
Yeah, يعني
Destroying.
actually he said you can يعني ديفيد هيوم قال حتى أنت ما تقدر ترجح، لأنه أنت مجرد أنه حكمت أنه المفروض راح تطلع باكر، أو الأكثر أنه راح تطلع باكر، يقول هذا حكم، وحكم من لا شيء، من عدم، من ما بدون معلومات يسميها، ماكو حقيقة علمية وانطيت هذا الحكم، ففي الحقيقة أنت مو قادر حتى على الترجيح، حتى على نقول ممكن باكر يطلع أكثر، يعني شانس أكثر، يقول حتى هذا ما لك حق تقوله.
موجود يعني.
This is a very more important part of I think like of modern philosophy after Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is very important because he tries to answer a lot of these questions about David Hume. David Hume أعطاه هواية آراء، وإيمانويل كانت يحاول يرد على ديفيد هيوم. برشن راسل هذا الفيلسوف اللي يجي قال أنا أعتقد حتى هو هم فشل، يعني ما حد لحد يعني هو يعني 1912 last century يعتقد أنه ما أجى واحد يرد يعني بشكل صحيح عن آراء ديفيد هيوم. But after that, from 1900s with new kind of philosophy, there are two big schools of philosophy that came about. There's the analytic school, الفلسفة التحليلية, which is what I was taught. Like I was, the whole of 4 years that I've studied philosophy, we just done فلسفة تحليلية أكثر شيء. I've heard of Nietzsche, I've heard of Heidegger, I've heard of Marx, but not in the philosophy classes, in my sociology classes, my study of like society and اجتماع. Or you could hear in economics or other subjects, but not in philosophy that most of the world teaches in schools, in university. In school of analytic philosophy, we focus on just looking at one concept, one idea, justice or knowledge, and we try to just separate it from everything else. We look at that thing very carefully, and we try to understand that thing. And we rely on science. We try to rely on science a lot. I think this comes from the empiricists that I was talking to you about, like David Hume and stuff. They saw that experience is very important for learning. So that's something that, like analytic philosophy tries to understand. This is all very theoretical. It doesn't relate to our lives a lot. The continental philosophy, هذا الفلسفة القارية يسمونه. That one focuses on a siyaq. It says that the concept is important in the siyaq, in the society or that environment, and it makes sense in that environment.
Yes.
You can't just take it out and look at it in isolation because it's not the same anymore. It's very important in I saw in religion. Stuff that in cultural,
yes, very important.
power. This is my siyasa in religion. I saw from the Quran. I try to understand one ayah. I can't understand it by itself a lot of the time. I have to look at the siyaq al-ayah until I make sense of it. So the tahleel, the same way that I was trying to do, doesn't always work. It's like another important thing about falsafa al-qariyya, it says that science is not the main source of knowledge, because الفلسفة التحليلية, things like science gives us a lot of knowledge about the world. Physics, maths, biology, all these areas tell us a lot about the world and how it is. But فلسفة القارية, مثلا if you read Nietzsche, he doesn't just focus on the science, he focuses on philology. That's what's his area of study. He looks at مثلا the idea, like you have مثلا God, and he goes back in history. He uses history or مثلا other sources of knowledge, and he tries to like show you how the idea of مثلا God came about. Or مثلا good and evil, what's good and what's bad, how did that come about? So they use other kinds of sources of knowledge to understand the world. To be honest, a lot of the philosophers don't even accept these differences, like مثلا analytic and concept. So I divided them, and so it's تقسيم. But a lot of philosophers say, oh, these are just different ways of saying the same thing. Okay, maybe there's actually no difference. I think we come to the fun part. Okay, so moral philosophy, الفلسفة الأخلاق, أكثر شيء, it talks about our life. That's the important part, and it's becoming more important, I think, today. Before, like maybe 1900s, they didn't think philosophy of akhlaq was even philosophy, because it's got to do with things, how we should live. It doesn't have to do with the world that is not personal. Moral philosophy puts the person in the middle, and it looks at him. Yeah? So that's why it's very important. But then we think about what is right and what is wrong. Who decides what's right and what's wrong? Does God decide what's right and what's wrong, like religions say? Or does reason tell us what's right and what's wrong? Like Immanuel Kant said. Immanuel Kant says, you shouldn't kill because reason says it's wrong to kill. If I want to kill someone, I say, what if everyone killed everyone? Okay? I don't make an exception of myself. I don't put myself above someone else. I say, what if everyone tried to do that? Okay? اجتماع ينتهي بعد. There will be no one alive. Or so I shouldn't do it. What about lying? Is it wrong for me to lie? I say, okay, let me imagine if everyone lied, what would happen? Then no one would believe anyone else. So I shouldn't lie because the ijtima, the whole society will get destroyed. Promise keeping. Should I keep my promises? يعني وفاء بالعهد. Well, if everyone didn't keep their promises, there would be no trust. No one would, give money to anyone else, and they will say, "I'll pay later." There's no trust. So that's what. Who decides what's right? Questions that are important, like we looked at, is assisting suicide. That's another important question. A lot of people are dying in hospitals. They have cancer, and they say the doctor says you have a month to live, and the doctors can't do anything about the patient. Okay, he's gonna die, and he's gonna just suffer every single day until he dies. There is no purpose for his living. He's just gonna be there, just suffering, being very bad pain, and he wants to end his life. And the question comes up: do people have the right to end their lives? Do doctors have the right to help them end their life? That's a question they think is very important. In religion, in Islam, we say no. Actually, maybe the traditional understanding was no. Your body is not yours. God decides when you should die, and so we say no. Suicide is wrong in any case, and even in the case where.
70 سنة بس ما.
Sorry. Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, and I was just going to talk about what's good about philosophy, which is it gets us thinking about important questions, these questions that I talked about, and there are other reasons to talk about it. We don't have time, and if you want to learn about philosophy, Bertrand Russell عنده كتاب كلش زين تاريخ فلسفة الغرب اللي أبوي عنده.
حلوة ما أبوك عنده.
And Plato's dialogues هذا أفلاطون الديالوجز اللي عنده كلش حلوة ومؤثرة هواية. And there is a YouTube series actually on justice هذا مال مايكل ساندل. أنا تروح باليوتيوب تكتب justice مايكل ساندل مثلا يجي له يعطيك نفس البحوث وعنده ترجمة عربية.
ترجمة بالعربي
كلش حلو. So that's Thank you.
Any question?
Stay there.
One second,
Yeah, ask.
No, I got it. I got it.
بعدين
أحد عنده سؤال مداخلة يعني.
هذا شكرا.
أين؟
I was going to say about philosophy, the reason I don't get into philosophy is because I feel like there's no actual clear explanation to anything. So what you said before about I shouldn't kill because if everyone killed there would be no humans. How is that a bad thing? Humans are killing this planet.
Nah, it's not that. I think what you say is like, if everyone killed everyone, no one would be alive or something.
Yeah. How is that a bad thing?
Well, like,
So
There'll be
you have
no
to
people.
accept
Like
that
something.
existence is a good thing.
The humans on this planet, people say are like cancer on a human.
But you make a judgment.
Yeah, that's a logical judgment. Is it true that humans are affecting this planet in a very negative way?
No.
Okay, no.
nah, they say because like humans ended the life of most of the animals
Yeah,
at
because-
least.
yeah,
It's not
because-
clear why humans existing is a good thing. Why
It's
is
the
it?
best option. Because some people saying, oh, people were the plastic killing the human, killing the animals, like finished alive, or that, like, you know, this manufacturer making the ozone effect. It doesn't mean this. This is like a point of like this, what they call life expenses. So you need to be exist. You need to be keep going. You have to pay. And so for every person, he need to pay money. But what about whole world? What they gonna pay money? No. So there is like effect on the earth. That's what the effect. So it doesn't mean you need to kill everyone because they are not good.
I'm not saying you should kill everyone. I'm just saying that who decides what is good and what is bad if it's so controversial?
So that's why he told you the good
Yeah,
example.
because like if you can't just say, okay, if I say for example, lying is bad because if everyone lied, no one would believe anyone else, and you say, well, so what? Okay, it does. I mean, you see like the whole basis of ethics, just akhlaq, just goes under question because we think that lying is a bad thing. Now here comes Kant. He tries to explain why it's a bad thing. If I just say, oh well, it doesn't. I just keep saying, well, so what? Okay, lying. Okay, everyone will just not believe anyone else. So what? I mean, how can we live? How can we keep living? Don't keep your
قيمة
promise.
عليا كانت يعني عنده فد قيمة عليا.
That's another part of it. He thinks like we should respect persons. يعني الأشخاص we should respect them as ends. يعني I don't know how you say the technical words in Arabic. Because مثلا, for example, I respect something as a means. مثلا, I use a hammer as a means. يعني مثلا حتى I can bash a nail. I can't use it.
لذاته.
لذاته.
هذا شيء آخر.
يعني تحترم الأشخاص بذاتهم.
الإنسان هو بنفسه يكون هدف مو لأجل أمر آخر. حتى الحكم الأخلاقي هو الكانت يقول تفعل الشيء لأجل أنه جيد لا لشيء آخر. يعني تعطي الصدقة لأن دفع الصدقة بحد ذاته جيد لا لأنه يوصلك للجنة ولا لأنه المجتمع راح يحترمك ولا لأنه أنت تحب هذا. حتى تحب هذا يقول هذا مو فعل أخلاقي إذا
ولا لأنه الله سبحانه وتعالى
أبدا يقول هذا جارك من السلم عليه when you say hello to your neighbor يقول لازم من السلم عليه تعتقد أن هذا أمر أخلاقي يجب أن يفعل ما له علاقة تحصل وراء ثواب العلاقات الاجتماعية تتقوى هو بحد نفسه.
If you want to be good, you do the right thing because it's good, not because of heaven or because of God or because God will be happy or because you know anything else. That will just make it not a good, not a moral action. If you want to be, if you want your فعل to be أخلاقي, you have to do it because it's the right thing. I should help this person because it's the right thing. It doesn't. I'll go to heaven, great, but it's not my goal. Okay, so it's not against deen. I don't think it's against.
No, it's nothing to do with deen actually.
يعني تقدر تكون يعني ناس إيه.
لا مو ملحد لا.
من خلال دراستك للفلسفة يعني هل تعتبر هاي المفاهيم واقعية مثلا وجديرة بالقبول مثلا من
يعني تقدر مثلا تعطيني مثلا
يعني احنا عندنا الفلسفة الإسلامية تختلف تماما عن الفلسفة مع ذول الفلاسفة اللي موجودين.
لا ما اعتقد يعني يختلف تماما. هذا رأيي يعني مثلا اكو مثلا افكار two thoughts actually I was going to say I forgot two important ideas اللي ديكارت وديفيد هيوم عندهم تقدر يعني تلقي something similar to it in كتاب أبو حامد الغزالي. مثلا in Descartes مثلا has a thought of مثلا there's a part Descartes has a section هذا Descartes عنده فد نقطة من كتابه يحكي وتلقي نفس يعني صفحة nearly the same page الwords أبو حامد الغزالي said before him. And David Hume he talks about causation اللي مثلا أنا حكيت عنه. الغزالي عنده يعني تقريبا نفس
تقريبا ولكن منطلقها يختلف.
بس I'm trying to say like if they're doing philosophy they get to the same truth يعني راح يوصلون نفس الحاجة. فلسفة إسلامية ما أعتقد أكو شيء يسمي فلسفة إسلامية. أكو مثلا you can explain مثلا you can defend Islam but that's just being a theologian يعني مثلا عالم دين.
about يعني you لازم تطلع خارج كل الحدود يعني there is no border. There is يعني هو هاي.
No, there is some border like مثلا I say I accept.
You have to think of something limitless يعني يصير thinking حتى تصير يعني تقدر توصل إلى نتيجة.
Yeah, like you step outside the box you consider from like all areas you look at.
Exactly. يعني إذا أنت خليت الدين توقفت الفلسفة because you got the answer for everything.
Yeah.
So you have the answer.
They say philosophy teaches you how to think. Religion tells you what to think. هذا الفرق الكبير. أنا هم يعني لحد الآن ما I don't want to accept it, but it's true. I can't. يعني there is a truth to it.
Like following your teacher, the guy he said like you started from like God and then you go into philosophy.
Yeah. I start with God. I start with مثلا Islam, but what I think is Islam.
Yeah.
And then I go forward. That's all right. مثلا they do the same thing. مثلا if you read John Locke, he assumes some things as well. شنو يعني assumes? يفترض. He accepts some things because of his society or because of his. He accepts God exists. He talks about he has a theory about memory, and they say مثلا should you punish someone who is a drunk that does some things wrong, but then he wakes up and he forgets everything he did. Okay, مثلا there are people like that. Actually, we know that. مثلا he gets drunk, he does something terrible, wakes up the next day, he doesn't know what he's done. And the question was for these Christians, John Locke had to answer, was in the day of judgment, يعني يوم القيامة, when God wants to punish someone, and he says to this drunk person, he says, you did this and this, and so you're going to be punished. And he says, well, I can't remember. How is that fair? I thought like, I didn't do it. So he has to solve that problem. I forgot the reply he says, but the idea is like he assumed God exists as well. I don't see a problem. I assume God exists, and then I do my philosophy. It's simpler as a theory if you don't have a God.
Yeah.
Simpler because more people will accept it. But I think like God exists, so I'm gonna do this philosophy. I don't care if someone doesn't accept it.
يلا فضل.
Yeah, ask.
So you know how you said that like if there's going to like be a sun and like there's someone think that there's not going to be a sun tomorrow, then if there's no sun, then you think that the other person's going to be like, oh, there's like no sun, so it's going to be like dark the whole day. But you think that there is not going to be a sun.
Okay.
No, I didn't say that.
Philosophy of kids. That's important.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? Well, let's say the sun don't come out. What's wrong with that? يجعل لكم نهار الليلة سرمدا
شكرا.